What's happening, everyone? Happy Tuesday, week 43 of the year. Can you believe that just 71 days from today, we're going to be in 2026? All right, guys, we're going to be talking about how to turn your 2026 health insurance renewal into smarter savings. We're going to talk about how to stop overpaying without cutting coverage. We all know the old broker tricks: put in a high deductible plan, put in an HSA, put in an HRA. Those things stopped working a long time ago, and we're going to be giving you the real goods on how to cut your costs without cutting coverage. I'm going to give it here maybe about 30 seconds or so, give people a few seconds to join us and get settled in. You're going to want to take notes today, guys, so grab a pen and a piece of paper, and we'll get started here in just about 30 seconds. If you're joining us on LinkedIn, do me a favor, drop a note in the comments. If you are in HR, you're a CFO, and you've got your renewal already for 2026, let us know how it's looking. I'm curious to know what everyone's seeing in the market. Give us just a percentage and let us know where you've landed. So far this year, we're seeing them come in a little higher than I think what everybody expected. So I'm curious to know where you guys are landing. All right, let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Welcome again. Thanks for joining me. Today's session on turning your 2026 health insurance renewal into smarter savings. We all know the feeling. The renewal hits your inbox once again. It's the same spreadsheet, just a bigger number, and usually that spreadsheet comes without an explanation. Every year, you find yourself stuck in the same cycle. Your broker sends over the renewal quote. You're looking at double-digit increases, minimal justification, and a tight deadline to respond. This is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You're unfortunately left just to scramble, figure out what changed, what's causing this renewal increase, why did costs jump, and are there any real alternatives? Unfortunately, most people usually end up just seeing the same 3 to 4 carriers on a different spreadsheet year after year. This feeling is a feeling of being trapped, and it is a vicious cycle until you learn how to buck the cycle. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're going to cover 5 topics. We're going to talk about the renewal trap, why it is that way, why it feels that way. We're going to talk about the cost drivers behind that renewal trap, what's driving your costs this year, and what's driving costs overall. We're going to also talk about how do you reshape your plan. And we're talking about the architecture of the plan. We're not talking about the plan design. We're talking about the plan architecture, what goes into the supply chain. So we're going to be sharing some levers that you can pull even as early as January 1, 2026 to lower your costs. We're also going to talk about communicating these changes out to employees. We feel like this is a very important part of the overall process of lowering your costs. You're going to need to find a way to get employee buy-in if you truly want this to work for the long term. And then we're going to share a little bit about our blueprint to help you guys win in 2026. So we're going to give you a roadmap to negotiate better terms and achieve predictable savings. So let's get after it. First off, let's talk about the problem that we're dealing with today, the annual pain cycle, as we call it. So when your renewal arrives, you get another renewal, another increase, minimal explanation. Usually it's just chalked up as, oh yeah, it's trend. And trend is a real thing, but there's also things that you can be doing to mitigate that trend increase. So then you end up going to market, and I hear this time after time, our broker shops the market. Well, shopping the market is a part of the problem. It's a part of what keeps you stuck. So you go shop the market, you look at the same 3 to 4 carriers every year, 4 if you're lucky, usually only 2 to 3 maybe. And then you have to sift through spreadsheets or page after page after page of carrier quotes and digest all of this information. And usually this comes with a little bit of sticker shock, double-digit increase, no clear path forward. And you end up choosing what we call the least bad option. Not the best option, but the least bad option. You sign off on it, you implement it because you got a short timeline to get it done. and then you wash, rinse, and repeat the same cycle year after year. Guys, you have the ability to change this. You have the ability to stop this cycle from happening, and we're going to show you how today. So here's why it feels hopeless. Most people are stuck in a system where the carrier dictates the rules, meaning you're inside of their supply chain. They don't just control the pricing, they control the networks, they control the contract terms, they control the PBMs. They literally hold all the cards, and they choose which cards to put on the table and which cards not to put on the table. Then you have your broker. Most brokers are just simply playing a middleman role. And that's why they're called brokers, because all they're doing is brokering the relationship between the insurance carrier and the employer. Now, if you have a broker, you're going to notice that, your broker oftentimes usually just sells with a spreadsheet, right? They're going to go to market and they're going to tell you, yeah, we checked the market. Right now it's looking like ABC carrier is the best place to be. Well, why? Is it just because of price? Because as a broker, they have the ability to do so much more than just negotiate on price. They have the ability to help you restructure the entire supply chain. But if they're only playing middleman, they're not going to be too worried about how that care is delivered, only about what the cost is. And in addition to this, most brokers are going to be compensated by the carrier. This creates an absolute conflict of interest between you and your broker. Because if your broker is being paid by the carrier and the carrier dictates how much the broker's paid, well, then really they're working for the carrier and not for you. And ultimately you end up paying the price. So big picture for 2026, when we talk about medical trend, I mentioned it earlier, medical trends projected to be anywhere between 8 to 12% this year. This is the largest medical trend that we've seen in the last 4 years. As you can see here, 2023, it was about 7%, 24 and 25, it was 8%. And looking ahead to 2026, we're talking about an average increase of 10% across all group health plans. This is simply unsustainable. What other expense in your business is going up double digits year after year? Tell me one and show me how it's sustainable. And I bet it's not. So this is just inflation. This is a hidden tax. And ultimately, if you have $1 million spend and your renewal increases 10% annually, you're adding an extra $100,000 of cost. But did you get more value? That's the question you have to ask yourself going into 2026. Is anything changing? Is your plan getting richer? Is your coverage getting better? Are your employees paying less out of pocket for the care that you're fronting the bill for? If not, this isn't just another renewal. This is you accepting the fact that you're letting the carriers dictate the terms instead of you taking control. It's not value creation. It's simply extraction for profits. So I mentioned this earlier. We hear this all the time, but we shop the market. Our broker shops the market. What does that mean, right? Because anybody can go out and shop the market, and a lot of brokers do, and they do exactly that. And they'll go out and they'll shop the market. And this is where I think employers get it wrong. They think that, well, maybe if I have multiple brokers shopping the market for me, I'll find somebody who can get a good deal. When all you're doing is shopping the market, you're just simply saying, hey, what's the best price that you could do for the product that you put out there? Instead of looking at that product, ultimately what you need is healthcare delivery for your employees, right? How do you deliver healthcare to your employees at the ultimate lowest cost? So instead of shopping the market, I want to challenge you guys this year to try and shape the market. So shopping the market really only lets you make decisions based on prices when you should be making decisions based on structure. Because if you shop the market, you're going to see the same opaque pricing. Look, I'll be honest with you. One broker isn't going to get a different price than a different broker unless something is fundamentally changed in the quoting process and how you go to market. All quotes from carriers are built on hidden spreads that you're not able to see in a quote spreadsheet. You have the same vendor ecosystem no matter what broker quotes your deal. And then you end up with the same misaligned incentives inside of your program. Every vendor in the stack profits from your inability to design a supply chain effectively to deliver healthcare to your employees. And that's what we really want to help you do, is see how do you design the supply chain to deliver healthcare and drugs to your employees at the lowest possible cost. So ultimately, to do this, you need to follow the money, right? Too many people start by making decisions based on premiums instead of by making decisions based on costs. We have a saying around here, it's manage inputs, not outputs. If you can manage the inputs, i.e. the cost of care, the cost of drugs, your fixed expenses, these are all inputs that drive your premiums. If you follow the money, this is how you manage the inputs. So we're talking about your variable costs, right? Variable costs being your claims cost or the cost per unit of care, and also your pharmacy costs. These are your two big variable expenses inside of your premiums. If you know how the money flows for your variable expenses, you can start to unpack where some of the misaligned incentives are and really drive down your costs. So if you manage those inputs, you will end up with better outputs. And this is how you start to eliminate the carrier margin. This is the insurance company's administrative fees and their profit. So following the money is the best way to manage this expense. So the hidden factor number one, this is what we like to call low-hanging fruit. Your pharmacy spend, your RX spend. Pharmacy benefits are one of the fastest growing expenses inside of today's health plans. When we talk about what's driving some of these exploding expenses inside a pharmacy, well, a hot button topic is GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy. These drugs are costing on average about $1,000 a month, and they can be sourced for much, much less outside of the traditional PBM supply chain. In addition to that, you have specialty medications. So when I say specialty medications, this is usually your tier 4 drugs. Now, not every company has this problem yet. Okay, I'm going to say that. Not every company has this problem yet. But if you don't have this problem, you will eventually end up with this problem, because specialty medications are becoming so prevalent in terms of drug spend today. They account for about 50% of your overall drug spend across all group health plans. But get this, only about 2% of prescriptions. So out of all prescriptions, specialty meds or tier 4 pharmacy account for about 2% of total drugs prescribed, but 50% of total spend. This has a huge impact on your plan. And if you don't eliminate the waste associated with specialty medications, think things that you see on TV, right? Like you have Tremfya, Humira, Skyrizi, all the ones that you see advertised on TV. These are specialty medications. They come at a high cost, and they pay an even higher rebate back to your insurance carrier that you don't always get to see. Additionally, when we say rebates, we're talking about when a drug is filled, usually there's a manufacturer rebate on the table. And that manufacturer rebate, the person who manufactures the drug, when that drug is filled, that rebate gets paid back to, typically in the traditional PBM arrangement, typically to the PBM, and the PBM retains that rebate as profit. So understanding how much in terms of rebates are coming back to your PBM is very important. And most PBMs aren't going to be willing to share this information with you, or if they do share the information with you, usually it's in the form of what they call a shared rebate. So if you have a shared rebate and you're not retaining all of that rebate, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So you have to work to eliminate this rebate opacity. Additionally, another thing you want to work to eliminate inside of the pharmacy supply chain is spread pricing. Spread pricing is simply when your plan pays $40 for a drug, and then the PBM pays the pharmacy $20 for the drug. The PBM keeps that spread. They keep that additional $20, and that's pharmacy spread. So there's a lot of different ways that PBMs are extracting premium dollars and pocketing them for profits. So if your PBM tells you that they negotiated a great rebate, but they keep most of it, that's not really helping you out. So an example of this is a drug with a $10,000 list price, and there's a lot of them out there, may generate a $3,500 rebate. but your plan may only see a portion of that rebate, and the PBM ends up pocketing the large majority of it. This is totally legal, and it's costing group health plans a fortune. So hidden factor number one, and the easiest switch to make, is changing your pharmacy benefit manager. When you change your pharmacy benefit manager, you want to look for a transparent pharmacy benefit manager. And what I mean when I say transparent, not just as a buzzword, you want the pharmacy benefit manager to share a full data set with you. So what was the list price of the drug? What was the wholesale acquisition cost of the drug? What was the rebate for the drug? And how much did your plan pay for the drug? And how much of the rebate is being passed back to you? You want to be able to have full access to this data so you know that your inputs are being managed effectively. And if your pharmacy benefit manager isn't willing to share that with you, or like some pharmacy benefit managers, they want to charge you a fee to see that information, that's not a transparent pharmacy benefit manager. Today, rebates are being touted as ways to keep employers engaged with their health plan. I'll tell you a quick story. I met with an employer who's got about 6,000 employees on their plan, and their pharmacy benefit manager is one of the big four pharmacy benefit managers, and they have a shared rebate arrangement. And so one of the things that their broker said to them is, if you leave this pharmacy benefit manager, think about all the rebate dollars you're leaving on the table. Well, rebates aren't really the name of the game anymore, guys. The name of the game is to get lowest net cost on the drug. A rebate just simply shows you that you overpaid in the first place. So eliminating pharmacy bloat, hidden factor number one that you want to get your hands on for 2026. Hidden factor number two. Now, this one applies specifically to self-funded employers, but it's stop loss renewal creep. So stop loss insurance is a part of a self-funded health plan that protects the employer from catastrophic claims. It's simple. It limits your losses, right? That's why they call it stop loss. And this is how smaller employers, think 50, 100, 300 lives, 500 lives. This is how smaller employers are able to self-fund without taking on all the risk themselves. But ultimately, what we see happening when stop loss renewal creep occurs is year one, you get clean stop loss implemented, you get coverage at reasonable rates. But year two, if you're not protecting yourself from lasers and there's a high cost claimant in your plan, you could be opening yourself up to huge risks in the form of a laser. The way that a laser works is, think of it like if you have car insurance and you get in an accident, right? You get in an accident and you normally have a $500 deductible. Well, now that you've had that accident and they see that you're a risk to their insurance plan, they now say, hey, your deductible next year is going to be $25,000. You would never accept that, yet it happens all the time in self-funded health plans with stop loss insurance. And then when you get into year three, you might end up with multiple lasers that reduce your coverage, because what happens is now, instead of being on the hook for a much smaller amount of that individual's care because they've had catastrophic claims, now the stop loss shifts that entire burden over to you. A good way to mitigate this risk from the very beginning is to look for stop loss carriers that offer no lasers in perpetuity. Now, they're out there. They might be a little hard to find. We know of a few of them. So if you need help with that, feel free to reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction. But lasers essentially can make it so self-funding is no longer feasible for you. So if you can limit those lasers in the beginning, when you first go self-funded, when you first put that stop loss plan in place with a no laser clause or a no laser contract, you're going to have much smoother renewals over the coming years. So again, it's just specifically when one person has catastrophic claims and the stop loss carrier points them out and says, hey, we're no longer willing to carry the risk on that individual. Now you have to carry that risk. The carrier doesn't end up losing because now they're just providing stop loss coverage for quote unquote the more healthy portion of your group. And you want to eliminate that risk from the very beginning. Next up, hidden factor number three, network pricing games. And this is where we talk about the overall supply chain, right? We're talking about pharmacy. We're talking about insurance protections. We're talking about network. And then the final one that we're not really going to focus on today is your administrative side of it. So this is another part of your variable expenses. when it comes to your network pricing, this is how your claims are priced. Most carriers, or let me start over. Most employers are married or tied to PPO networks, and they think that that's the only way to get the best care to their employees. PPO networks have been made valuable through perception, right? And because everybody wants the biggest and best network, and they think that they're going to get the best care because they have the best network. Well, this isn't always the case. Unfortunately, what we've found is that in looking at billed charges through PPO networks, most employers who rely on PPO networks only end up overpaying 3 to 4 times more than what the actual cost of the care is. So you have the cost to deliver care, and then that cost to deliver care gets marked up 300 to 400%, and that's what's called your discount. And now, how do they call that a discount? Well, let's talk about it. It starts with the actual hospital setting billed charges. Okay, so if a hospital sets billed charges at $10,000 for a procedure, and then the network comes in and negotiates a 40% discount, but that procedure actually only costs $2,500 to deliver, this is how employers end up paying 3 to 4 times per unit cost of care. And if you don't know how much you're paying per unit cost of care, you're operating in the dark right now. So one of the things that you can do is look for alternative solutions to deliver care outside of PPO networks. One of the best solutions that we've found for employers that helps keep their unit cost of care down is direct contracting with provider facilities or direct contracting through an aggregator who offers bundled services. This is a way that you can significantly lower your per unit cost of care by up to 20 to 25%. So think about it. If you have a $2 million spend annually and let's say 1.4 million of that's being spent on cost of care and claims, and if we back out the pharmacy, let's say $1 million of that is being spent on just medical claims alone. If you can lower that $1 million medical claim spend by 20%, cut that $2 million spend down to 1.8 million, you've just done yourself a huge favor. And all you have to do is you don't have to eliminate the network. You just have to find alternatives to offer to your employees in addition to the network. So finding ways around the network pricing game is a hugely impactful way to lower your cost of care. So we talk about all of these things and we talk about misalignment, right? Misalignment in the fact that a broker's commission is tied to your overall premium spend. So let me back up here, because if you don't know how your broker is compensated, you're missing the mark. And this is something that you should know. This is something that by law, you're supposed to know. When we talk about the law here, we're talking about the Consolidated Appropriations Act that's been around for a couple of years now that says brokers are required to disclose compensation. So if you don't have a compensation disclosure on file from your broker, just ask for one. And if you find out that your broker's being paid a percentage of commissions, so overall, you have a $2 million spend, and let's say your broker's compensated at 5% of that $2 million spend, well, then your spend goes up to 2.2 million or 2.3 million. And now all of a sudden your broker's getting 5% of that pie. That piece of pie just got bigger as your costs increased. So the easiest way out of this trap and this misalignment is to work with a broker on a fee basis instead of a commission basis. Fee basis is a flat fee brokerage arrangement, one that keeps your broker's fees stable. And in turn, instead of your broker incurring increases in revenue as your costs go up, your broker's revenue is simply designed to work for you instead of against you. Another misalignment here is the carrier administrative fee. This is the carrier margin. And so if you're on a fully insured plan, this is what I'm talking about. A fully insured plan regulated by the Affordable Care Act says that on these fully insured plans, these carriers have to operate within the medical loss ratio limits. And the medical loss ratio limits are going to be 85-15 for large groups, meaning that Out of every dollar you spend on premiums, 85% of it must go towards the cost of care or quote unquote plan improvements. Okay. So your carrier is the one that gets to decide what those plan improvement costs are. But overall, the majority of that dollar, 85 cents out of every dollar, should be spent on the cost of care, which leaves just 15% margin for your carrier's administrative fees. Now, that's your carrier's profit, right? But in addition to that, if we go to the next layer here, when we talk about PBMs, it's usually your insurance carrier in the fully insured arrangement that owns the PBM. And if your insurance carrier owns the PBM, the Affordable Care Act doesn't regulate how much money the PBM can make inside of this supply chain. So this is where spread pricing and rebates come in, because in addition to their administrative fees of 15% of every dollar that you spend, every time your company files and pays a pharmacy claim, that PBM is extracting profit from that supply chain. So that's why it's super important that you get a handle on how your PBM is retaining revenue. And then the last one here in the overall stack of misalignment is that network pricing inflation. So inflated billed charges that make discounts look good on paper are actually meaningless if you look at what the true cost of the procedure is. So the way that network discounts work is kind of a top-down model. They start at the top with that billed charge, then they insert the PPO discount, and then you end up paying a lower amount from that total billed charge. Now, bottom-up pricing says that if the cost of the procedure is at $2,500, we're going to start here and find a fair and reasonable price from the $2,500, not from the $10,000. And this is how you can have an impact on your overall cost of care. When you stack them all, you're talking about 30 to 40% of overall waste inside of your health plan. And a lot of times it's more than that. So that's why when your renewal hits, those fees are already baked in, right? Those fees are already baked into your renewal, and they're usually baked in about midway through your plan year. Most employers, when they get to renewal, is about the time that they start to make decisions. And if you wait until you get your renewal to make decisions, you're already too late, because those fees, that misalignment's already built into the structure of your program. The only way to combat this is to reformulate how you approach this entirely. It's to look at who are the vendors that are required to deliver healthcare to your employers, and then find the vendors that are going to best support your program and rebuild the supply chain. So instead of working from a reactive space as you go into 2026, you work from a proactive, strategic approach. You know that I need to address my PBM this year. I need to address my network charges this year. And I'm not just going to go in and change carriers, because ultimately that's not going to fix anything. The only way that you're going to fix this renewal is by saying, who are the vendors that we can have the biggest impact on cost with, and let's swap out those vendors. Now, again, I mentioned this earlier, but our philosophy is very simple. Manage inputs, not outputs. If you're making decisions based on premiums, you're looking at the goalpost. You're looking at the wrong number on the page. The traditional approach to managing a health plan focuses on comparing your renewal to other quotes in the market. These are all just outputs that you're making decisions on. With our approach, again, we want to look at what's driving the cost of care. What are our top 10 conditions? What are our top 10 RX fills on this plan? What's costing us the most, and what can we have the biggest impact on? When you manage these inputs, your outputs become more predictable. Your renewals become more stable. And when you get to the end, you can finally justify, okay, here's why our renewal is increasing. It's because of X, Y, Z. It's because of this drug and these procedures, right? So it gives you more insight into your plan spend. It gives you more data to make better decisions. And it ultimately lets you see where your money's flowing and what you can do to control that flow of money. So think like a manufacturer in this equation, guys. As a manufacturer, you wouldn't dream of giving a single vendor unchecked control over your entire supply chain, right? You have a supply chain inside of your organization, And if you were beholden to one vendor to manage that entire supply chain, and all you did to improve your efficiency every year was just switch vendors, you're just giving control to somebody else to make decisions for you. Your health plan is a supply chain here. Okay. So when we talk about it, I mentioned it earlier, but there's four main components in your supply chain. You have your suppliers, which are your providers, your distributors, which are your networks, your inventory, which is your pharmacy, and your logistics, which is your claims administration. But most employers, again, cede control to one vendor to manage every piece of the supply chain. And in that traditional supply chain, where you manage your manufacturing facility, you're going to require multiple vendor bids. You're going to require clear pricing transparency. You're going to require performance metrics, and you're going to enforce those performance metrics. And you're also probably going to have regular vendor reviews. And if a vendor's not working, you're probably going to swap that vendor out. And additionally, you're going to negotiate directly with that vendor. You're not going to negotiate with that vendor through a middleman like you do in your health plan. And when we look at how that works in a health plan, you have a single vendor. They give you a bundled quote for all of the vendors that it takes to deliver healthcare. You end up with opaque pricing, no real accountability. You hear it a lot. It is what it is, or claims are claims, right? It's not true, guys. You have the ability to hold your vendors accountable when you pick your vendors instead of letting someone else pick your vendors. And also in a typical health plan, you really only have that annual renewal, which becomes your only touch point with the carrier. Now, if you're spending $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, or $3 million on your health plan, and you're only having an annual review, or if you're only getting limited data from that vendor, you're not in a good position and you've ceded control to the carrier. It's time to apply the same rigor to managing your health plan supply chain that you do your internal operations. So when we talk about the different levers that you can pull for 2026, if you're fully insured, you're fully funding your health plan, and you're letting a carrier make all the decisions on the vendors for you, you can expect that your spend is always going to be about 20 to 30% more than what the rest of the market would spend to accomplish the same goal. When you move into a level funded vehicle to manage a spend, this is where you start to open up a little bit of transparency. Now, you don't get complete transparency and complete control, but you get more transparency. And sometimes, depending on which level funded program you choose, you do get a little more control. But if you want total control and you really want to work to drive down your costs, the only way to do that, the only way to take control of the supply chain is to self-fund. And if your broker is telling you it's too risky to self-fund, or you're not large enough to self-fund, sometimes you have to go outside of that broker relationship to see if that's really the case and if that's really true, right? There's so many small groups today that are able to successfully self-fund with the inclusion of things like stop loss, with the strategies built in to drive down the unit cost of care and the cost of drugs. Ultimately, if you're self-funding just to self-fund and you're not attacking the variable expenses, your broker might be right. It's probably not a good idea to self-fund. So if you're going to self-fund with an ASO arrangement with, say, Meritain or Blue Cross, TPA, or whoever the case is, if you're still in that carrier supply chain in an ASO model, then your broker might be right. Self-funding probably isn't the right move for you. The only way to self-fund successfully is if you put yourself in control, in the driver's seat, with choosing your own vendors, negotiating your own contracts, and finding folks that are really going to work to drive down your unit cost of care. So lever 2, after you choose your funding structure, then you want to work towards vendor independence. So in traditional fully insured arrangements, your carrier bundles all of the delivery vehicles. All of the supply chain is bundled into one centralized system. That's your claims, your network, your pharmacy, and your stop loss coverage. Your carrier essentially is the backbone, and they own all of those different vendors. This bundling eliminates your transparency and locks you into their margins. Vendor independence is what breaks the bundle. In order to achieve vendor independence, you have to work with an independent TPA, your third-party administrator. Now, this is a fixed cost for your plan. So again, one that we didn't put too much emphasis on managing today, but it's important to choose a TPA that is going to allow you to use an independent PBM. It's important to choose a TPA that's going to allow you to implement things like direct contracts, surgical bundles, potentially dual option network strategies. It's important to choose a TPA that's going to give you flexibility in designing your plan. If you have evaluated TPAs in the past, or you're thinking about evaluating TPAs this year, we have a very handy TPA evaluation checklist. Be happy to share that with you guys. There's some great questions in there that you should ask before you make your TPA selection, because ultimately your TPA is the one that's going to give you the ability to take greater control of your health plan, and they have to be on board with helping you do that. Next up, if you have the right TPA, you're now in a position where you can choose the right PBM. Pharmacy benefit managers out there are designed in today's market. The big three players are designed to extract as much profit out of your pharmacy supply chain as possible. In order to eliminate this, you have to find a TPA who's going to be willing to show you how they get paid, right? And this is a very reasonable question to ask of your vendors. How do you get paid? How much money do you earn from doing business with us? And if the TPA or the PBM isn't willing to share that information with you, that's red flag number one, that you shouldn't be working with them. In today's environment, most of the PBMs that we're implementing for clients don't get paid a spread. They don't get paid rebates. They simply get paid a flat fee for managing the pharmacy. And that fee is usually a per employee per month fee, and it's very inexpensive. And it allows you to get total control over your pharmacy supply chain. And then finally, if you don't have an independent TPA, you're not going to be able to find independent stop loss carriers. And this is important because you want to be able to not only shop your TPA and shop your PBM, but you also want to be able to shop your stop loss carrier. Stop loss carrier can be an invaluable partner because they're going to help mitigate your risk. And if you do so effectively, you're going to have smooth sailing for at least a couple of years in your program. Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody's going to have a bad year, whether you're self-funded or not. Just because you go self-funded doesn't mean that the increases go away, right? They still occur, but you're able to mitigate that by picking the right program partners and putting them into place, allowing you to take greater control of managing this expense. And the third lever that we've talked about a little bit, but I want to highlight some creative strategies here, is your network strategy. So this is where you have the biggest opportunity for immediate savings, but it's often the least scrutinized component, right? And I said it earlier, it's because most people feel comfortable with a PPO network. A PPO network is not the only way to deliver care to your employees, right? Most employers accept that they have to have a nationwide PPO network. Well, guess what? Just because you have to have a nationwide PPO network does not preclude you from implementing other saving strategies inside of your plan. Matter of fact, we just implemented for a manufacturer in St. Louis a traditional PPO network, but then we also included a direct contract with a major provider in the Missouri area that lowered the cost of claims 20 to 25% from the very beginning, from day one. So anybody who goes to see this provider already is paying less for the cost of care. And in addition to that, we incentivize the employees inside of this group plan to go see these providers by offering them lower out-of-pocket expenses, lower deductibles, lower copays, lower coinsurance, lower costs all around. Incentivizes your employees to make wiser decisions. Because if an employee has an option between going to a traditional PPO hospital network and paying a $5,000 deductible, or going to a direct contracted network and only paying a $1,000 deductible, they're going to make the decision that's in their best interest, which is to keep their costs lower, which ultimately keeps your costs lower. So you have the ability to implement tiered networks where you reward employees for going to high value providers. You have the ability to implement direct contracting, whether that's with a local health system or potentially with a direct contract aggregator, somebody that takes bundled services across the country and aggregates them into one place for your employees to seek care. You have the ability to implement reference-based pricing, which is that bottom-up pricing that we talked about earlier instead of the top-down. And you also have the ability to implement centers of excellence programs. And a center of excellence is just a health system that has excelled in one particular area of expertise. And as a result, they have efficiencies, economies of scale that bring down the cost and allow you to get certain procedures done at their facilities with a higher value care at a lower cost. Here's a quick case study for you on a company that we worked with, Salcomp Manufacturing. This manufacturing company had about 275 employees. They were looking at a 24% renewal increase. This was driven primarily by vertical integration in the supply chain and traditional brokers shopping the market, right? So they went out to market, they shopped the market, and that 24% increase that they were projected to have on the renewal was maybe mitigated down to about an 18% increase. Well, the solution that we brought to the table was for them to completely reintegrate transparent and independent vendors into their supply chain. We moved them to a level funded arrangement with an independent TPA, independent PBM, and 100% rebate pass through. And that resulted in them getting a flat increase for the year instead of having to take that 24% increase. This saved them about $240,000 annually on a $1 million spend. Now, here's one of the components that we talked about earlier, but employee education. It's key to the entire strategy because as you implement these innovative strategies, you have to be sure that they're tailored to meet your employees where they're at. So if you have employees that are confused about where to access care, this is where you end up with expensive claims. So education is really important in the process. And one of the ways that we've found that is very effective for helping employees access the best care at the lowest cost is with concierge care navigation. So a lot of the self-funded programs that we put in place include a concierge care navigator, which is just simply a phone number on the back of the insurance card that says, when you need care, call this number. And you give employees instructions, simple, clean instructions. If you want to pay less for healthcare, start by picking up the phone and calling this number. Okay. And I'll say it, but we beat this into their head, right? It's very important. And this is just not a one-time message. This is not just given during open enrollment. This is a message that is shared year-round with the employees. So concierge care navigation picks up the phone. The employee says, hey, yeah, my doctor said I need to get an MRI, possibly have surgery. Where can I go to get the best care at the lowest cost? The care navigator then works behind the scenes, facilitates an appointment for the employee at a facility where you potentially have a direct contract in place. And this is how you guide your employees to get the best care at the lowest cost. This helps eliminate things like ER overutilization, helps eliminate brand drugs being prescribed just because they're a brand drug, helps eliminate out-of-network care for employees when they know they have a resource and a tool that they can use to go get the best care at the lowest cost. Now, if you don't do a concierge care solution where employees can pick up the phone and call a nurse navigator, another very helpful solution for employees is a price transparency tool. So the way that price transparency tools work is pretty simple. It's an app or a website. Anytime an employee needs care, they can simply go to their app. They can say, hey, I need to go have a knee surgery done. Which facility in my area has the best cost for knee surgeries? They put in the procedure code, it pulls up the prices in their area, shows who's in network and who's not, and allows them to pick the facility that has the lowest billed charge for that. So we work on a 3-step engagement plan for the clients that we work with on these strategies. And number one is to simplify the messaging, right? It has to land with the employees. And one of the easiest ways to make it land with the employees is to hit them in the pocketbook. So if you're able to design your plan to incentivize employees to get low-cost care and lower their out-of-pocket expenses, they're going to listen and they're going to pay attention. Give employees an example. Hey, if you go to facility A, you pay $1,000 out of pocket. You go to facility B, you pay $5,000 out of pocket. Show them a real-world example of how it works in their situation and make sure that the message is simple and that it lands with them so that they know that, hey, if I want to save money, all I have to do is pick up the phone. If I want to save money, all I have to do is open this app. And then we use visuals, not PDFs. So let's be honest, nobody's reading that 50-page benefit guide, right? Usually that ends up in the trash, or it's deleted off their computer, it's filed away, saved for later, and nobody ever accesses it. So using short videos to help educate employees on how to best utilize their health plan, or even short one-pagers with infographics on it. And then also, as I mentioned, consider mobile-friendly decision tools that employees can just put on their phone, go to and use anytime that they need to access care. And then, like I said, it's not just a one-time message. This is a message that has to be reinforced at a minimum quarterly, but preferably on a monthly basis. So whether that's just with an email communication, a Slack communication, or just something that you put out maybe on your internal payroll system to employees once a month, a healthcare corner where you can go and highlight some of the best benefits that your plan has to offer to incentivize employees to seek care at the right facilities. Now, when we look at this through a CFO lens, because CFOs evaluate health benefits differently than HR leaders do, HR typically focuses on coverage adequacy, employee satisfaction. CFOs need budget predictability. They want ROI visibility, and they want strategic alignment with the business objectives. So what they really want is they want a predictable spend, one that fits into annual budgets without surprise increases. When you have the data, you're able to have a quarterly look at how your plan's performing, and you're able to prepare yourself for what the upcoming year is going to look like well before your renewal is ever released. In addition, having that data brings transparency. So if you're halfway through your plan year and it shows that, your pharmacy spend is about 40% of your overall claim spend, you can tell right there halfway through the plan year that you're running into pharmacy problems, and you need to be sure that come for your new plan year, you're ready to address those pharmacy problems in some way, shape, or form. And this also gives you control mechanisms. It allows you to have proactive conversations about cost management rather than reactive conversations about spend mitigation. And then lastly, the data is the all-important piece here. Moving to these types of structures, whether it's level funding or self-funding, ultimately gives you the data that you need to manage your spend instead of working blindly just to make decisions based on which carrier's pricing looks the best. Now, let's talk about timing. I mentioned it earlier. We're only 71 days away from 2026. So if you're still with me, you're probably thinking, well, there's a lot that I just shared, right? And it sounds like a lot to implement and a lot of heavy lifting. And I'll be honest with you, it is. But if you have the right broker, if you have the right consultant, if you have the right partner, a lot of that heavy lifting should be done by their agency and not your organization. So when it comes to timing, the best positioning is going to be about 120 days out. You want to start making renewal decisions before your renewal lands. This is going to give you maximum leverage. It's going to give you time to analyze your data, solidify your strategy, evaluate your vendors. And then when you're 90 days out, you're still in a good position because you already know what strategy you're implementing, what vendors you need to evaluate, and you can still implement these vendor changes and negotiate favorable terms. Now, if you find yourself 60 days out, which we're only about 11 days away from, you're going to be looking at limited options and you're going to be forced into quick decisions, usually with your existing vendor relationships. At that point, it's just all about how do we mitigate the increase as opposed to how do we change the system. So you may already be working on a Band-Aid for this year, but you have the ability to put that Band-Aid in place this year and make those strategic changes going into 2027. And then when you're 30 days out, if you wait till 30 days out to make decisions, you're in crisis mode. At this point, you're going to accept whatever the market gives you. You're going to have very minimal negotiating power. So timing is your most powerful advantage in the entire equation. And this is why we even recommend doing a mid-year plan review as opposed to waiting till 90 or 120 days out to make any decisions. Because when you do that mid-year plan review, you have 6 months worth of data. You have the ability at that time to make a huge impact on your upcoming strategy. More time equals more leverage, gives you better terms. So with everything that I've shared, guys, if you're unsure where to start, I want to show you the checklist that we use right here. Let me see if I can switch screens and share this checklist with you. All right, give me 1 second. All right, so hopefully everybody can see this annual review checklist. I'll promise you it doesn't suck. This is a checklist that we use internally with clients, and it gives you an idea of what documents you need to gather: your year-to-date medical and pharmacy claims report, your stop-loss claims tracking, your fee schedules, employee feedback, that's a big one, last 2 years of renewals, vendor contracts, benchmarking data, and your broker service agreement. So in order to use this checklist, once you have gathered those documents, then you can go through line by line, compare your year-to-date claims with the past 2 years, identify your top 10 conditions driving claims, track your high-cost claimants, analyze your top 25 medications. Now, I'm not going to go through this line by line with you, but you can see when you go through this, at the end of it, you check the boxes on what you were able to accomplish, and it'll indicate whether or not you're in control and ahead of the curve, whether or not you may have some risks lurking, or if you can't check 15 of these items up here, shows you that you're flying blind into your renewal. This is a very handy checklist and gives you an idea of everything that we would look at to help design your strategy going forward. If you're interested in having this checklist sent to you, shoot that QR code in the bottom right hand of the screen. It'll take you to my LinkedIn profile. Just send me a quick DM on LinkedIn that says checklist. I'll drop this in your inbox later today. That way you can get started working on your 2026 plan. Guys, I hope I shared something today that helps you lower your costs without cutting your coverage. That's what we do around here. The last thing that we want to do is take away from employees. If you're interested in running through this checklist with us, shoot me a note. Happy to jump on a call, look at your current setup, talk about what's working, what's not, and what can be improved. And if you're interested in having me send you this checklist, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. Looking forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks for your time today.